The night shift was my domain. For 5 years, I'd been the sole security guard for a massive 20-story corporate office building. I knew the place intimately, every echo in the marble lobby, every creak of the old elevator, every hum of the server room. The silence was my friend, a familiar blanket that made the endless hours feel peaceful. My routine was a soothing ritual, a patrol of every floor, a check of every lock, a final glance at the bank of security monitors in my small office. On a Tuesday night, during my final patrol of the 7th floor, I found something that didn't belong. On the desk of a senior executive, a spotless mahogany expanse that I had checked just an hour before, there was a single, new file folder. It was a crisp, beige color, with a pristine label tab. My blood ran cold. The building was on lockdown, the doors sealed. No one was supposed to be here. I cautiously picked it up, my heart thudding in my chest. I opened it. It was completely empty. I told myself it was an oversight from the day shift, a forgotten file, a minor disruption to my perfect routine. I placed it in a nearby file cabinet and locked the drawer. The feeling of peaceful familiarity was gone, replaced by a cold, prickly sense of being observed. I went back to my office, the memory of the empty folder, a nagging thought in the back of my mind. On the security monitor, the hallways were still and silent, a network of empty corridors. I tried to focus on the routine, on the familiar hum of the server room, on the steady, rhythmic breathing of the building. But the silence now felt like a held breath, a moment of anticipation. I started my next patrol, my senses on high alert. I went to the 7th floor, my flashlight a small beacon in the oppressive darkness. I checked the file cabinet I had placed the folder in. It was still locked. I went to the senior executive's desk. The file folder was there, not where I had left it. It was sitting in the exact same spot as before, the pristine beige of the folder, a sickening highlight in the dark room. I opened it, my hands shaking. It wasn't empty this time. Tucked inside was a single, crisp sheet of paper. On it, drawn in a shaky, black ink, was a symbol I didn't recognize. It was a strange, intricate knot of lines and circles, a sigil of some kind, unsettling and alien. I slammed the folder shut, a wave of pure terror washing over me. This was not a prank. This was a message, and it was meant for me. I ran from the 7th floor, my breathing ragged and loud in the empty hallway, and took the stairs, not daring to wait for the old, groaning elevator. As I passed the 6th floor, I saw it, on the large white board in the main conference room, the same symbol, drawn in a shaky black marker. The lines and circles were there, staring at me, a silent, knowing presence. I ran down the stairs, faster and faster. A building that was once my home, now a terrifying labyrinth. My heart was pounding, and I could hear a new sound, the sound of the fluorescent lights. They were flickering in a strange, rhythmic pattern, a slow, deliberate cadence that seemed to be communicating something, a silent, blinking message from the building itself. I finally made it to my office, my body a coiled spring of tension. I looked at the security monitors. The hallways were empty, but there was a blur of movement on the 10th floor camera, a quick, fleeting shape that moved too fast to be human, and too slow to be a trick of the camera. The feeling of being watched was no longer a feeling, it was a reality. I tried to contact my supervisor on the radio, but all I got was static, a low garbled hiss that was a perfect, sickening white noise. The landline was dead. I was trapped. I knew I had to get to the server room, the heart of the building, to re-establish communications. I grabbed my flashlight and a baseball bat I kept under my desk and moved out into the lobby. The sound of my own footsteps, a lonely, terrified echo. The power was now flickering everywhere, the low hum of the fluorescent lights, a chorus of unsettling sound. I made my way to the server room, a large cold room on the sub-basement floor, a place where the building's digital brain was housed. I unlocked the heavy door and stepped inside. The cold air, a sharp contrast to my sweaty skin. The hum of the servers was a powerful, rhythmic beat, a sound of life and technology. As I reached for the main console, I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from the air ducts above me. It was a slow, deliberate sound, a tap tap tap, a code. I held my breath, my entire body rigid, my eyes fixed on the air duct above my head. The tapping began to spell out a word in Morse code. A word I knew from my time in the military. HLP, help. The tapping stopped. The silence that followed was heavy and terrible. Then, I heard a new sound, a slow, metallic scraping, and the ceiling panel above me, the one that covered the air duct, slowly began to creak open. I watched, horrified, as the small, dark space above was revealed. A thin, pale hand, with long, unnaturally jointed fingers, slowly reached down from the darkness, its fingers beckoning, a silent, horrifying command for me to come closer. The tapping stopped, and was replaced by a wet, clicking sound. A sound of a tongue against the roof of a mouth, a sound of hunger and anticipation. I ran. I didn't wait to see the rest of it. I ran out of the server room, out of the basement, and into a small, windowless office on the first floor. I locked the door, pushed a heavy desk in front of it, and huddled in the corner, a trembling, terrified wreck. I stayed there, listening to the silence of the building, for what felt like an eternity. The day shift found me there, a pale, shaking mess, when they arrived at dawn. The authorities found nothing. The 7th floor was pristine, the senior executive's desk was empty, and the whiteboard in the conference room was clean. The server room was exactly as it should have been, the ceiling panel shut tight, with no sign of a hand, or a tapping sound, or a hunger. I never worked another night shift again, but I can't shake the memory of that hand, its long, thin fingers, beckoning me, and the chilling thought that the silence of the empty building wasn't empty at all. It was just waiting for the right moment to make itself known. The city library was my second home. As the late-night archivist, I was responsible for digitizing the library's vast collection of historical records. A quiet, solitary job that I adored. My shifts began at 10 p.m., after the last patron had left and the heavy oak doors were locked. The building, an old, sprawling labyrinth of stories and secrets, was my sanctuary. I knew every dusty corner, every whisper of the air conditioning, every groan of the old wooden floors. My favorite part of the job was the solitude, the feeling of being the only living soul in a building filled with millions of stories. One particularly quiet night, while I was working on a collection of 19th century maps, I heard it, a faint, rhythmic thud, like a book being dropped on the floor. It came from the 5th floor, the locked, historical manuscripts section, a place where I was the only person with a key. I froze, my hand hovering over the scanner. I told myself it was an old book shifting on a shelf, a quirk of the ancient building. I told myself it was my imagination. It was nothing. But the silence that followed felt heavy and expectant. A moment of profound dread that was a complete antithesis to the comfort I had always felt in this place. I tried to shake it off, to go back to my work, but the silence of the library had changed. It was no longer a peaceful presence. It was a listening presence. I went back to my work, but I was now listening. And then I heard it again. This time, it wasn't a thud. It was a soft, deliberate sound, a rhythmic slide of a book across the floor, followed by the soft, rustling sound of a page being turned. The sounds were always from the 5th floor, the locked floor. I told myself it was a mouse, a rat, anything that could make a sound that wasn't human. But the sound of a page being turned was too deliberate, too knowing to be a rodent. The fear started to turn into a terrifying, morbid curiosity. I had to know what was on that floor. I took my flashlight and the master key and made my way up the winding, silent stairs, each creak of the old wood an exclamation point to my growing panic. I unlocked the heavy metal barred door of the 5th floor and stepped inside, the dusty, air cold, shocking contrast to the warmth of the lower floors. The hallway stretched out before me, a long, dark corridor of books. The silence was absolute. My flashlight cut a small, trembling cone of light through the darkness. The books on the shelves, thousands of them, were all facing outward, their spines a silent, watchful audience. But one book, on a small, secluded shelf, was turned to face inward, its spine a blank space in the endless sea of titles. I approached it, my heart pounding in my chest, and that's when I heard the sound again, the soft, deliberate rustle of a page being turned. It was coming from right behind the book. I reached out, my hand shaking, and pulled the book out. Behind it, in the small, empty space on the shelf, there was nothing. The sound of the page turning came again, this time from the hallway, from a distance, from a place where I was sure there was no one. The books on the shelves, I noticed, were now not in their correct order. A strange trail of books, each one an obscure, forgotten title, was laid out on the floor, leading to a small, hidden corner of the floor I had never seen before, a place where a thick, dusty curtain hung from the ceiling, hiding something from view. I followed the trail of books, my flashlight beam a trembling, terrified finger pointing the way. The rustle of the pages, the rhythmic turning of the paper, was now a constant presence, a sound that filled the air, a sound of a story being told, a story that was just for me. I reached the curtain and pulled it back, the dusty fabric a soft, choking presence in the air. Behind it was a small, hidden room, a reading room I had never seen before. It was a small, circular room with a single, massive oak table in the center, a table that had a single book on it, a large, dusty, leather-bound tome. The book was open, its pages a shocking, pristine white against the dark wood of the table. They were blank. The book was a story that had never been written, but as I stared at the blank pages, I saw it. A small, dark shadow, a blot of ink on the pristine white, slowly started to move across the page. It began to grow, its edges becoming sharp and defined, its shape changing, becoming more and more human. It was a silent, black silhouette, a man made of ink and shadow, a man who was now standing, rising from the pages of the book, a terrifying presence against the white. The man made of shadow slowly turned his head, his face a hollow, empty void, and he stared directly at me. He raised a long, dark arm, its fingers elongated and thin, and with a horrifying, silent gesture, he beckoned me to come closer, to come and read his story. I ran. I didn't stop to think. I didn't stop to scream. I ran out of the reading room, out of the 5th floor, and out of the library, leaving my keys, my work, and my sanity behind. I called the authorities, a hysterical, rambling mess, but they found nothing. The 5th floor was empty. The books were all in their correct place, and the small hidden reading room was gone. The space behind the curtain, a solid brick wall. The librarian on the morning shift told me the building had no such room. I never went back. I can't shake the memory of that empty book, and the terrifying, cold thought that some stories are not meant to be read, but to be born, and that I was the only person who had been there to see it happen. I've been a janitor for over 30 years, and the graveyard shift is my preferred time to work. The quiet, the solitude, the feeling of being the last person left in the world, it's all a calming presence in my life. This particular job, however, was different. I was working the night shift at an old abandoned elementary school that was being prepped for demolition. It was a dusty, silent place, filled with the ghosts of 1,000 forgotten children's laughter. My job was simple: clean it out, sweep away the dust of memory. I was in an old classroom, a small room with faded wallpaper and a single, massive chalkboard. When I found it, the chalkboard had been wiped clean moments before, a pristine, black expanse. But in the center, drawn in a shaky white hand, was a child's drawing. It was a crude stick figure, but its limbs were long and spindly, its body a thin, fragile line. The figure was standing alone, in the middle of a blank space. My blood ran cold, but I dismissed it as a prank. Kids had been sneaking in for years. I grabbed my eraser and wiped it clean, leaving the chalkboard a black, blank canvas again. But the image of that long, spindly stick figure stayed with me, an unsettling stain on a place that was supposed to be empty. As I continued my work, the silence of the school began to feel different. It was no longer a peaceful presence. It was a listening presence. I went to the next classroom, a large, sprawling space with 2 blackboards. The first one was clean. The second one had a drawing on it, the same stick figure, but this time it was larger and more detailed. It had a crude, smiling face, and its long, spindly fingers were holding something I couldn't make out. The fear turned from a cold dread into a hot, suffocating panic. This wasn't a prank. There was no one in the school but me. I ran from the classroom, my heart pounding in my chest, and made my way to the next hallway. I heard a sound from the end of the long, dark corridor. It was a faint, high-pitched giggle, a small, childlike sound that was both innocent and profoundly evil. It came from an open classroom door, a door that had been shut moments before. I stood there, frozen, my body a coiled spring of terror. The giggle came again, a little closer this time. The lights in the hallway, which had been a steady, humming presence, began to flicker. A quick rhythmic blinking that seemed to be communicating something, a silent message from the building itself. I started to notice a strange, cold presence following me. A presence that felt small and childlike, but with a malevolent twist. A feeling of an old, steep hatred that was trapped in this building. I went to the next classroom, and the drawing was there again. This time, it was on the floor, in a patch of dust. A massive, crude drawing of the stick figure, with a small, smiling face and long, spindly fingers. The drawings were no longer just drawings. They were a story, a terrifying, animated narrative of something that was trapped in this school. My terror was now a constant, physical presence. I was running from classroom to classroom, a terrified prisoner in a labyrinth of my own making, trying to find an escape. The giggling was now a chorus of voices, 1,000 small, hype sounds of laughter, all of them directed at me. The drawings were everywhere now, a wall of crude, smiling stick figures with long, spindly limbs, a silent, mocking presence. I finally ran to the school's old gymnasium, a large, dark, echoing space that felt like a sanctuary from the claustrophobia of the classrooms. I stood in the center, my flashlight beam, a trembling, dancing finger of light, trying to catch my breath. The giggling stopped. The silence that followed was heavy and terrible. I heard a new sound, a slow, rhythmic tapping, coming from inside the wall, right where the drawing's chest would be. The tapping intensified, a quick, insistent cadence that was impossible to mistake. I looked at the wall, a vast, white expanse of plaster, and saw it. The same stick figure drawing was there, a massive, crude drawing of a man with long, spindly limbs, its fingers splayed out on the wall, its head tilted to the side. The tapping intensified, and the drawing began to peel away from the wall, the paper and chalk a horrible, scraping sound. A small, stick-like hand, its fingers long and spindly, pushed out from the wall. A terrifying, silent, beckoning gesture. The giggling was back, a chorus of high-pitched sounds of pure, unadulterated joy. I don't remember what happened after that. I just remember the feel of my lungs burning and the raw, scraping terror in my throat. I ran from the gym, out of the school, and locked myself in a small utility closet until dawn. The demolition crew found me there, a pale, shaking mess, when they arrived in the morning. They found no drawings, no open doors, and the gym wall was a solid, unblemished expanse of plaster. I never worked another night shift again, but I can't shake the memory of that drawing and the terrifying cold thought that some stories are not just in the imagination. Some stories are trapped, waiting for the right moment to come out.